Years ago, when I was serving in youth ministry, I moved to a smaller town in southwest Ohio. When I got there, I introduced myself to another youth pastor. In fact, the reality was in that county, we were the only full time youth pastors, just me and PD. And we were talking, and I asked him, I said, well, doesn't your denomination do things like on the district or state or even national levels of youth ministry? And he said, yeah, we do, only we don't participate. I thought, that's kind of weird because in both churches I had served in, our youth ministry and our church participated in local and district and state and national youth ministry events. And so we kind of started to have this conversation. We would engage in this conversation, and I started to talk about how my youth pastor network operated, and I said, "Don't you have a youth ministry network?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's you. You're the only guy that I network with." And I thought, man, how sad is that? I have a pastor who I've crossed paths with down here in Kentucky, and he actually started his church. Started it in his house with just a few people, and he's grown it. It's a big church. 1,000 people, I think, is what they have on Sundays. But he's very non-denominational, very Lone Ranger mentality towards ministry, and I've tried to engage with the guy, and I've bumped into him, out and about, and just tried to kind of start a conversation or relationship with the guy. And he's just very, Lone Ranger. And I've thought about that. When pastors don't network, when pastors don't connect, or when they're in a non-denominational church, they're really out there. There's very little, if any, support system for them. And I thought about, this guy here in Kentucky that has this church that he started, and what happens if he left that church for any reason, good reason, bad reason, or indifferent reason? How's he going to network to find a job? I'm Church of God out of Anderson, Indiana, and if that was my situation, there are networks. We have a website set up, and there's people in state offices and even in the national office that can help network me and connect me with potential ministry careers. And so while I'm talking about the Church of God, I'll give you a plug for the Church of God Anderson. And I don't know about the Nazarene, the Presbyterian, the Baptist. I don't know. I can just speak about the Church of God. But in the Church of God, and we're really a small denominational movement. There's 2,000 churches in the United States and in Canada. And so there's a pretty big network. And because we're small, like, even though I may not have met people, I'll hear names of pastors. And so there's still that connection. We have a structure, depending on the state, depending on the size of the state and how many churches are there, that might be a local. I served in a church where there were like 13 Church of God congregations in the county. And so we just did stuff as county churches together and supported one another. Ohio was divided into 5 districts. Here in Kentucky, we're divided into 3 districts. And so the districts will do things together in support of one another. The state, states in the Church of God work with their pastors and their congregations. And so there might be a state youth convention or a state general assembly or a state camp meeting or something that gets states involved. I kind of jokingly think about the state of Hawaii. We have one Church of God congregation in the state of Hawaii, and I think, well, every Sunday you're doing, local, district, and state stuff together because you're the only one there. But there's structure, and so there's support and there's help, and I personally have taken advantage of that, where I've had to reach out to my district, or I've had to reach out to the state. I've even had to reach out to our national office, for wisdom and guidance and advice, to let them know what's happening in the church or in our district or whatever. And there's support and structure to help me through those things. We have an ordination process. Yeah, I know, and I'm not going to get off a tangent, that you can go online and get ordained, and you can do certain things with your online ministry ordination piece of paper. That's a whole nother tangent. Don't get me started. But in the Church of God, we have an ordination process, and I'm an ordained minister. Since 1999, I'm in good standings. And so what that means is that the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, supports me and backs me, kind of put the stamp of approval on me. And so not only do I represent the Halstead name, or, the church I'm serving in, or the state I'm serving in, but I represent the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, as an ordained minister. But that also gives me some support and some backing and some love and some helps along the way. Traditionally, pastors have not made tons of money. We do okay. But, a church is going to pay what a church can pay. But what's cool about the Church of God is we have a pension program. And so, it's not a 401k, but it is a pension program that Anderson helps us and navigates us through that and supports us and takes care of that pension for us. And so I tell you all that about the Church of God, and I talk about, my friend, the youth pastor, who didn't really have any support and structure and network, and this guy, this lone ranger, and he's really out there on his own to say this: God's going to call you where God calls you, and you're going to make a choice to either serve in that capacity or not serve in that capacity, but choose wisely. I'm born and raised Church of God. My parents raised me at the Pawnee Avenue Church of God in Wichita, Kansas. I went to a Church of God college and got a degree from there, and I've only served in 3 ministries, and all 3 of them were Church of God. That's me. I don't see myself serving outside of the walls of the Church of God in church ministry. If God called me to serve in another denominational church, I'm going to be obedient and go. But I'm Church of God, so this is what I know. But there are some people who are raised one denomination and they jump and serve in another denomination, and I'm not knocking that at all. There's pastors who was raised in one church and went to a college that was based in another church, and then they pursued ministries in those churches or whatever. And that's between the pastor and God in those ministries and those churches and those callings. But what I'm saying is, when you go into this with ministry, with your eyes wide open, to think about the structure, the support system. I will tell you, those 13 pastors in Stark County, Ohio, where I first started, man, they loved me and they supported me and they poured into me and they gave me opportunities and they pulled me along, and sometimes they pushed me and they poured into me, and we laughed together, and they taught me. And those men, those who are still alive, I can call them today and talk with them. And when I cross paths with them, we have conversations, and they still pour into me. And I have one that tells me, I pray for you every day. So I value that support and that structure. So as you look to serve in churches and look to serve in ministries, these are questions that we're not taught in college to ask. What's the support? What's the structure? What's the network? By the grace of God, I fell into that church in Northeast Ohio, and I fell into the arms of those men, and that was a wonderful God-sent blessing. But with your eyes wide open, ask questions about the church, about the district, about the state, about the national, so you know how that works, so you will know how you're going to be supported as you do the ministry that God has called you into. Hey, I love you, and I will see you next time.